if I saw that and I see their equivalent, I'd say that's a maxillary premolar. Is it first or second? How do I know if it's first or second? No bifurcated root means it's a second. Good. Good.
Wait, show the first one. The first premolar.
The first premolar has the two roots.
Oh, you got the two roots, okay, the second,
Bifurcated.
Because it goes like 2, and then 1, and then 3.
How can I forget that?
3, 1, 2.
I did so many
I don't know, I
different
forgot
ones.
it too before.
Okay, and molars. How do we tell maxillary molars from mandibular?
Trifurcated and
Yeah.
bifurcated.
Bifurcated root. Oh, I'm sorry. It goes to premolars on the mandible next. So on the mandible, if I were looking at this and I weren't sure if Mrs. Harvey would be mean enough to actually turn the teeth upside down and make me identify them, how do I know if that's a maxillary or mandibular?
How?
It has this very well undeveloped lingual cusp, right? Where on the maxillary, the lingual and the buccal cusp were almost equivalent, right? On the maxillary, we have, this is my buccal cusp, my lingual cusp, and they're almost the same occlusal plane. On the mandible, we see that very undeveloped lingual cusp. In the posterior teeth on the mandible, which way will the roots incline? So all teeth have a distal inclination except for mandibular anteriors, canine to canine. So if I see this distal this inclination, I know it's not a canine. I've established it doesn't have a cingulum, it doesn't have that lingual ridge or the double fossa. It's definitely a premolar. I know that it's mandibular because it has this undeveloped lingual cusp. I see the root inclination is
Distal.
this way, which I know all posterior teeth have a distal root inclination. So this would be my mesial aspect.
So right to
The right side.
the right.
And I would know that that is, and on the mandibular premolars, what distinguishes the occlusal table from between a first and a second?
The height of the lingual aspect.
The height of the lingual aspect. On mandibular second premolars, which are often congenitally missing, but on mandibular second premolars, they also have that anomaly that made the change from calling them bicuspids to premolars because it has oftentimes it's the tricuspidate form or 3 cusps, 2 lingual cusps. But even if it's a bicuspidate with just 2 cusps, between the first and the second, on the second you have a much more equivalent occlusal plane, a much more developed lingual cusp on a second. Looking at the occlusal of this, I see this is a tricuspidate form. It has 1, 2, 3. This would be my lingual aspect, my buccal. It has the third, has 2 lingual cusps, so I know that is a mandibular second premolar. I have looking at my labial view, my root inclination toward the distal, I place my midline. I know that's tooth number 29. We're good between first and second.
Let's go for more.
So on the first, there's a very undeveloped lingual cusp on the second, you're going to have a more equal cuspal relationship between the buccal and the lingual cusp. If it is a tricuspidate, the extra cusp is always on the lingual side, but we see the occlusal plane is almost equivalent, where on the first we have that it almost tried to look like a cingulum rather than a lingual cusp. And anodontia is very common. We see a first permanent molar. First permanent molar in both arches. What are these? What tooth type?
Premolars.
Premolars. First and second premolar. What looks different on this mandible? What's missing?
First molar.
Oh, no.
It's a baby tooth.
It's a baby tooth. We're missing the second. This would be looking at the patient's left side. And this is a patient of about 12 years old. There's no 12-year molar yet, but this is a primary second molar. There is no second mandibular second premolar. It's a commonly congenitally missing tooth.
Does it normally stay there?
Pardon?
Does it normally stay there?
Yes. Without the permanent tooth coming, the deciduous will stay there, the roots.
You have to have two first molars.
Yes. Occlusally, it would resemble a first molar. You would come along and look, and you would wonder what looks different here. Then when you got your radiographs back, you would see that very flared roots of a deciduous. They're shorter, but they're more widespread. You have to remember though, when that tooth came in, that child was 2. There wasn't a thick, huge mandible like there is at 12 years old.